In a world of British royalty, where every gesture carries weight and every bow has meaning, a single moment can expose the true feelings that simmer beneath polished smiles and formal protocol. What happened on that crisp autumn morning at Windsor Castle wasn't just a breach of royal etiquette. It was a window into the complex web of respect, resentment, and unspoken truths that exist within the most famous family in the world. When a seasoned royal guard, trained to treat all members of the royal family with equal deference, chose to offer a deeper bow to Kate Middleton's mother than to the Queen Consort herself, witnesses knew they had just observed something extraordinary. This wasn't a mistake, an oversight, or a moment of confusion. It was a deliberate act that would send ripples through the palace corridors and reveal just how deeply the divisions within the royal family truly run. The story that follows isn't just about a single gesture of disrespect. It's about power, legitimacy, and the invisible battles being fought every day behind the golden gates of Britain's most sacred institution. The morning mist still clung to the ancient stones of Windsor Castle as Sergeant Major William Harrison adjusted his ceremonial uniform for what he believed would be another routine day of royal duties. With 32 years of service to the crown, Harrison had seen 3 monarchs, countless state visits, and more royal drama than most people could imagine. His weathered hands smoothed the red fabric of his uniform, each movement precise and practiced. He had guarded secrets, witnessed history, and maintained the dignity of his position through scandals that would have toppled lesser institutions. But nothing in his extensive experience had prepared him for the choice he would make that October morning. A choice that would echo through the halls of power and forever change how the royal family viewed loyalty, respect, and the very foundation of their authority. The day began like any other in the royal household. Harrison received his morning briefings at precisely 6 o'clock, reviewing the schedule of arrivals and departures that would shape his duties. 2 significant visitors were expected that morning. Camilla, the Queen Consort, arriving at 9:30 for a private meeting with palace advisors about her upcoming charitable engagements, and Carole Middleton, arriving at 10:15 to discuss arrangements for her granddaughter Charlotte's upcoming school project that required some historical context only the royal archives could provide. On paper, the hierarchy was clear and unquestionable. Camilla held one of the highest positions in the realm, second only to the king himself in terms of royal precedence. She was entitled to the deepest bows, the most formal address, and the unwavering respect of every person in royal service. Carole Middleton, while mother to the Princess of Wales and therefore connected to the royal family through marriage and blood, held no official title and commanded no formal protocol beyond basic courtesy. Yet as Harrison stood at his post near the King Edward Tower entrance, watching the first of the morning's visitors approach, he found his thoughts drifting to conversations that had taken place in shadowy corners of the castle. Whispered exchanges between staff members who had served the royal family through its darkest and brightest moments. The staff quarters of any royal residence are alive with gossip, but they also serve as a barometer for the true feelings that exist beneath the surface of royal life. In recent months, those conversations had taken on a particular tone when discussing the Queen Consort. There was respect for her position, certainly, and acknowledgement of her role in supporting the king through difficult times. But there was also something else, a hesitancy, a reservation that spoke to deeper currents of feeling that even decades of royal service couldn't entirely suppress. Harrison remembered the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, when the entire world watched as the royal family navigated their grief in the most public way possible. He had been stationed near the family section of Westminster Abbey, close enough to observe the subtle interactions that the cameras couldn't capture. He had seen how Camilla carried herself with dignity and grace, how she supported her husband through those difficult hours. But he had also noticed other things. The way certain staff members' eyes lingered on Catherine, the Princess of Wales, with a warmth and admiration that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than professional duty. The sound of car tires on gravel interrupted his thoughts. Through the ornate gates, he could see the familiar black car that transported the Queen Consort approaching. Harrison straightened his already perfect posture and prepared to perform the duties that had become second nature over 3 decades of service. Camilla emerged from a vehicle with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years learning to navigate the complex choreography of royal life. At 76, she moved with careful dignity, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, her clothing chosen to convey both authority and approachability. She had learned, sometimes through painful experience, how to present herself as worthy of the crown that now rested symbolically upon her head. As she approached the entrance where Harrison stood guard, their eyes met briefly. In that moment, Harrison saw not the queen consort, but a woman who had spent decades fighting for acceptance, for legitimacy, for a place in an institution that had once viewed her as an outsider and, in some circles, still did. The look that passed between them was complex, acknowledgement of his duty, appreciation for his service, but also something that felt almost like a request for the validation that her position should have guaranteed, but somehow never quite delivered. Harrison bowed, as protocol demanded. It was a respectful bow, appropriate to her rank and position, but as he straightened and watched Camilla disappear into the castle's interior, he found himself thinking about the differences between earned respect and expected respect, between loyalty freely given and loyalty demanded by protocol. 45 minutes later, another car approached the gates. This time, Harrison recognized the more modest vehicle that often transported Carole Middleton to her visits with her daughter's family. Unlike the queen consort's arrival, there would be no photographers, no official record, no ceremony. Carole's visits were family matters, personal rather than state occasions. As she stepped from the car, Harrison was struck, as he often was, by how naturally Carole carried herself in these grand surroundings. There was no hesitation in her step, no visible anxiety about protocol or procedure. At 69, she moved through the royal environment with a confidence that seemed to come from knowing exactly who she was and where she belonged, regardless of titles or official positions. Carole Middleton had never sought the spotlight that came with her daughter's marriage to the future king. A former flight attendant who had built a successful party planning business with her husband, she had raised her children with values that emphasized hard work, family loyalty, and genuine kindness over social status or material wealth. When Catherine married Prince William, Carole could have easily been overwhelmed by the grandeur and expectations of royal life. Instead, she had quietly adapted, maintaining her own identity while supporting her daughter through the challenges of becoming one of the most watched women in the world. The staff at various royal residences had come to know Carole well over the years. Unlike some royal in-laws who seemed to revel in their newfound proximity to power, Carole treated everyone she encountered, from the highest-ranking officials to the newest housekeeping staff, with the same warmth and genuine interest. She remembered names, asked about families, and never seemed to forget a kindness someone had shown her or her family. Harrison had witnessed this firsthand on multiple occasions. He had seen Carole stop to chat with gardeners about their work, compliment kitchen staff on meals she had enjoyed, and express genuine concern when she learned that a staff member was dealing with illness or family troubles. These weren't calculated gestures designed to win favor or create positive publicity. They were the actions of someone who had never lost sight of the fact that titles and positions were far less important than treating people with dignity and respect. As Carole approached the entrance, Harrison found himself facing a moment that would define not only his own integrity, but also reveal the complex web of emotions and loyalties that existed within the royal household. The woman approaching him held no official title, commanded no formal protocol, and could offer him no advancement in rank or position. But she had earned something that couldn't be commanded or expected: genuine respect and admiration from those who serve the royal family. The moment arrived with surprising suddenness. As Carole reached the entrance, Harrison made his choice. Instead of the polite nod that protocol would have suggested for someone of her unofficial status, he offered a deep, formal bow, deeper than the one he had given to the queen consort less than an hour earlier. The gesture lasted only seconds, but its impact was immediate and profound. Carole, surprised by the formality of his greeting, smiled warmly and thanked him by name. She had, characteristically, remembered who he was from previous visits. But both of them understood that something significant had just occurred, something that went far beyond the simple mechanics of royal protocol. Harrison straightened from his bow with the weight of his decision settling around him like a mantle. He had served the crown faithfully for over 3 decades, had sworn oaths of loyalty and service that had guided every aspect of his professional life. But in that moment, he had chosen to honor a different kind of loyalty, one based not on titles or positions, but on character and earned respect. As Carole disappeared into the castle, Harrison remained at his post, knowing that his actions had not gone unnoticed. In a place where every gesture was observed, analyzed, and often reported, a royal guard showing greater deference to an untitled visitor than to the queen consort would not pass without comment. The morning continued with its usual rhythm of activities and protocols, but Harrison could sense a subtle shift in the atmosphere around him. Colleagues glanced in his direction with expressions that mixed curiosity, concern, and something that might have been admiration. Word traveled quickly through the castle's corridors, carried by the invisible network of communication that exists in any large institution, but operates with particular efficiency in royal households. By the time the morning meetings had concluded and both visitors had departed, Harrison knew that his actions would soon reach the attention of senior palace officials. The question was not whether there would be consequences, but what form those consequences would take. He had violated protocol, shown disrespect to the queen consort, and acted on personal feelings rather than official duty. Yet as he reflected on his choice, Harrison found that he felt no regret. In his 3 decades of service, he had learned that respect could not be manufactured or commanded. It had to be earned through actions, character, and genuine care for others. Titles and positions deserved acknowledgement and proper protocol, but true respect was something entirely different. The afternoon brought the first indication that his actions had indeed been noticed. A summons arrived requesting his presence at a meeting with palace security officials the following morning. The tone was formal, but not accusatory, suggesting that he would have an opportunity to explain his actions rather than simply face immediate disciplinary measures. That evening, as Harrison prepared for what might be his final night as a royal guard, he thought about the 2 women whose paths had crossed at Windsor Castle that morning. Both had arrived as visitors. Both had been fulfilling their roles in the complex ecosystem of royal life, but the respect they commanded had been fundamentally different. One had arrived with all the trappings of official authority, entitled to deference and formal acknowledgement of her position in the royal hierarchy. The other had arrived simply as herself, a mother, grandmother, and woman who had consistently demonstrated the kind of character that inspired genuine admiration rather than obligatory respect. Harrison's choice had been made in a split second, but it reflected feelings and observations that had been building over years of service. He had watched as members of the royal family and their associates earned or failed to earn the real respect of those who served them. He had seen how genuine kindness, humility, and consideration for others created loyalty that went far beyond duty or obligation. As he removed his uniform that evening, Harrison understood that his career might be ending, but his integrity remained intact. He had made a choice to honor character over protocol, earned respect over expected deference. Whatever consequences awaited him, he could face them knowing that he had acted according to his deepest convictions about what respect truly meant. The incident at Windsor Castle that morning would soon become the subject of intense discussion and analysis throughout the royal household. But for Harrison, it represented something simpler and more profound, a moment when he had chosen to bow to the person rather than merely the position, and in doing so, had revealed truths about respect, loyalty, and human dignity that extended far beyond the walls of any castle. The news of Sergeant Major Harrison's unprecedented breach of protocol spread through Windsor Castle with the swift efficiency that characterizes all palace gossip. By noon on that fateful October day, kitchen staff were whispering about it over lunch preparation. Housekeepers were discussing it in hushed tones while polishing silver, and security personnel were exchanging meaningful glances as they went about their duties. Lady Margaret Thornton, the Queen Consort's private secretary, and a woman who had dedicated 25 years of her life to managing the intricate details of royal protocol, first learned of the incident while reviewing the afternoon schedule in her oak-paneled office. The information came to her through Gerald Whitmore, the assistant private secretary, who had received it from a colleague in the security department who had witnessed the morning's events firsthand. Margaret listened to Gerald's account with growing disbelief and mounting concern. In all her years of service to the royal family, she had never encountered such a deliberate and public violation of established protocol. Royal guards were trained from their first day of service to understand that their personal feelings, no matter how strong, must never interfere with their professional duties. The hierarchy of respect and deference was not merely a matter of courtesy. It was the foundation upon which the entire system of monarchy rested. Yet even as Margaret processed the seriousness of Harrison's actions, she found herself confronting an uncomfortable truth that she had been trying to ignore for months. The incident at the castle entrance was not occurring in isolation. It was, instead, the most visible manifestation of currents of feeling that had been building throughout the royal household since Camilla's coronation as queen consort. Margaret had been present at countless royal events over the past year, and she had begun to notice subtle but unmistakable differences in how staff members responded to various members of the royal family. When Catherine, the Princess of Wales, entered a room, conversations paused not out of dutiful respect, but out of genuine warmth and admiration. Staff members straightened not because protocol demanded it, but because they were genuinely pleased to see her. When she spoke to them, their responses carried an enthusiasm and sincerity that went far beyond professional courtesy. The contrast with reactions to the Queen Consort was subtle but undeniable. Staff members certainly showed proper deference to Camilla, bowing and addressing her with appropriate formality. But there was a quality to these interactions that felt different, more mechanical, less spontaneous, as though people were fulfilling obligations rather than expressing genuine sentiment. Margaret had initially attributed these observations to the natural adjustment period that follows any major change in the royal hierarchy. Camilla had, after all, been a controversial figure for decades before her marriage to then Prince Charles. Her relationship with the future king had begun while he was still married to Princess Diana, creating a scandal that had shaken the monarchy to its foundations and forever altered public perception of the royal family. Even after Charles and Camilla's marriage in 2005, and despite years of careful public relations work designed to rehabilitate her image, Camilla had never achieved the kind of widespread popularity enjoyed by other members of the royal family. Public opinion polls consistently showed that while most people accepted her role as Charles's wife and supported her charitable work, she had never captured the public imagination or affection in the way that Diana had, or in the way that Catherine continued to do. What Margaret was witnessing within the palace walls, however, suggested that the reservations about Camilla extended beyond public opinion into the very heart of the royal establishment itself. The people who worked most closely with the royal family, who saw them in their most unguarded moments and understood their true characters, seemed to harbor their own complex feelings about the Queen Consort's position and authority. As Margaret sat in her office contemplating the morning's events, she was interrupted by a phone call that would complicate the situation even further. The caller was James Morrison, a veteran royal correspondent for the Times, who had somehow already learned about the incident at Windsor Castle and was seeking official comment. Margaret's heart sank as she listened to Morrison's questions. The journalist's information was remarkably accurate, suggesting that he had spoken to someone with direct knowledge of the morning's events. He knew about Harrison's differential treatment of the two visitors. He understood the significance of the protocol breach, and he was clearly preparing to write a story that would thrust this private drama into the harsh glare of public scrutiny. "I'm simply seeking confirmation and context," Morrison explained in his crisp, professional tone. My understanding is that a senior royal guard showed greater deference to Carole Middleton than to Her Majesty the Queen Consort during visits to Windsor Castle this morning. I'd appreciate any comment the palace might wish to make. Margaret's mind raced as she considered her options. A flat denial would be pointless. Morrison clearly had reliable sources and would publish the story regardless of official comments. An admission of the facts would only amplify the story's impact and create additional problems for the Queen Consort. Her best hope was to minimize the incident's significance while buying time to develop a more comprehensive response strategy. "Mr. Morrison," she replied carefully, "I'm not aware of any unusual incidents at Windsor Castle this morning. Royal Guards are highly trained professionals who consistently demonstrate appropriate respect for all members of the royal family and their guests. If you have specific concerns about security protocols, I'd be happy to have someone from that department speak with you." Morrison's chuckle suggested that he had expected exactly this response. "Lady Thornton, we both know that won't be necessary. I have multiple sources confirming the incident, and I think we both understand what it suggests about the current dynamics within the royal household. My story will run tomorrow morning with or without official comment. I'm offering the palace an opportunity to provide context or clarification." After concluding the call with Morrison, Margaret found herself facing a crisis that extended far beyond a single guard's momentary lapse in judgment. The story would inevitably frame Harrison's actions as indicative of broader feelings within the royal establishment, suggesting that even the Queen Consort's most loyal servants questioned her authority and legitimacy. More troubling still was Margaret's growing recognition that such an interpretation might not be entirely inaccurate. As she reviewed her observations from recent months, she began to see a pattern that extended beyond simple personality preferences or individual loyalties. The royal household staff who had served during Diana's years as Princess of Wales often spoke of her with a warmth and affection that persisted decades after her death. They remembered how she had treated them not as servants, but as valued members of an extended family. She had attended their children's weddings, remembered their birthdays, and shown genuine concern for their well-being during difficult times. Her famous ability to connect with people from all walks of life had been just as evident in her interactions with palace staff as it had been in her public appearances and charitable work. Catherine, it seemed, had inherited this quality from her late mother-in-law. Despite having no formal training in royal protocol before her marriage, she had quickly established herself as someone who genuinely cared about the people around her. Staff members regularly shared stories of her thoughtfulness, how she had arranged for flowers to be sent to a housekeeper recovering from surgery, how she had personally thanked security personnel after particularly challenging events, how she remembered details about their families and interest from previous conversations. Carole Middleton had clearly passed these values on to her daughter, and her own interactions with royal staff reflected the same genuine warmth and consideration that characterized Catherine's approach. During her visits to royal residences, Carole treated everyone she encountered with the kind of respect and interest that made people feel valued rather than merely tolerated. Camilla, by contrast, maintained the more traditional approach to royal staff relationships that had been standard for previous generations. She was unfailingly polite and appropriate in her interactions, but there was a distance and formality that prevented the kind of personal connections that had made Diana and Catherine so beloved within the royal household. This was not necessarily a criticism of Camilla's character or intentions. Many members of the royal family throughout history had maintained similar professional boundaries with their staff, believing that some degree of separation was necessary to preserve the dignity and authority of their positions. The issue was that expectations had evolved, particularly in the wake of Diana's revolutionary approach to royal relationships. Margaret realized that the morning's incident at Windsor Castle was not really about protocol or proper procedures. It was about competing visions of what the monarchy should be and how members of the royal family should relate to the people who serve them. Harrison's choice to show greater respect to Carole Middleton than to the Queen Consort was, in essence, a statement about which approach to royal relationships he found more worthy of genuine admiration. As the afternoon progressed, Margaret found herself dealing with a cascade of complications stemming from the morning's events. Palace security officials needed to be briefed on the protocol breach and its implications. Senior staff members required guidance on how to respond to questions from their subordinates. Plans needed to be developed for managing the media attention that would inevitably follow Morrison's story. But, perhaps most challenging of all, someone would need to inform the Queen Consort herself about what had occurred and prepare her for the public scrutiny that would result from the press coverage. That responsibility fell to Margaret, and she approached it with considerable trepidation. Camilla had worked tirelessly over the years to establish her credibility and authority within the royal family. She had endured decades of negative publicity, public criticism, and personal attacks while steadily building her role as a supportive partner to the king and a dedicated advocate for her chosen charities. The suggestion that she commanded less genuine respect than an untitled grandmother would be particularly painful for someone who had fought so hard for acceptance and legitimacy within the royal establishment. Yet the incident could not be hidden or minimized, especially with press coverage imminent. Margaret found Camilla in the blue drawing room, reviewing plans for an upcoming state visit with her events coordinator. The Queen Consort looked elegant and composed, her silver hair perfectly styled, and her clothing chosen to convey both authority and approachability. She was, as always, the picture of royal dignity and grace. "Ma'am," Margaret began carefully, "I'm afraid we have a situation that requires your attention." As Margaret explained the morning's events, she watched Camilla's expression shift from confusion to concern as something that looked very much like resignation. The Queen Consort listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but generally absorbing the information with the kind of composure that came from years of dealing with public relations crises. "I see," Camilla said quietly when Margaret had finished her explanation. "And you believe this will become a public story?" "I'm afraid so, ma'am. James Morrison from the Times has already called seeking comment. He seems to have reliable information about the incident, and he's indicated that the story will run tomorrow morning." Camilla was silent for several moments, gazing out the tall windows at the castle grounds where tourists and visitors continued their daily activities, unaware of the drama unfolding within the palace walls. "You know, Margaret," she finally said, "there are moments when I'm reminded of just how precarious this position really is. I've spent years trying to earn acceptance, respect, and legitimacy. I've dedicated myself to charitable causes, supported my husband through his challenges, and tried to serve the crown with dignity and grace. Yet a single guard's gesture can undo so much of that work." Margaret felt a surge of sympathy for the woman who had endured so much criticism and scrutiny over the years. "Ma'am, one person's actions don't reflect the feelings of everyone in the royal household. You have the support and loyalty of countless staff members who appreciate your dedication and service." Camilla smiled sadly. "Doi, Margaret. Or do they simply fulfill their professional obligations while reserving their genuine respect and admiration for others?" The question hung in the air between them, uncomfortable in its honesty and impossible to answer with the kind of reassurance that Camilla seemed to need. As the day continued, word of Harrison's protocol breach continued to spread throughout the royal household, generating discussions and debates that reflected the complex dynamics that existed beneath the surface of palace life. Some staff members expressed shock and disapproval at Harrison's actions, emphasizing the importance of maintaining proper protocol regardless of personal feelings. Others, however, quietly acknowledged understanding his choice, even if they couldn't publicly support it. The incident was forcing everyone in the royal household to confront questions that had been simmering beneath the surface for months. What was the difference between earned respect and expected deference? How much did personal character matter in determining genuine loyalty and admiration? And what did it mean for the future of the monarchy when even its most dedicated servants seemed to be making distinctions between official authority and moral authority? By evening, as Margaret worked late in her office preparing statements and strategies for managing the crisis that would unfold the following morning. She understood that Harrison's brief bout had accomplished something far more significant than a simple breach of protocol. It had exposed truths about respect, authority, and legitimacy that the royal family would now be forced to address in the most public way possible. The morning of October 15th dawned gray and drizzling, as if the English weather itself was responding to the storm about to break over the royal household. James Morrison's story appeared on the front page of the Times under the headline, "Palace Guards Telling Gesture Reveals Royal Hierarchy Tensions," and its impact was immediate and devastating. Morrison had crafted his article with the skill of a veteran royal correspondent who understood exactly how to present facts in a way that would generate maximum impact while maintaining journalistic credibility. He began with a straightforward account of the morning's events at Windsor Castle, describing Harrison's differential treatment of the two visitors in clinical, objective language. But then he expanded his analysis to explore what the incident revealed about the complex dynamics within the royal household. The gesture lasted mere seconds, Morrison wrote, but its significance extends far beyond a simple breach of protocol. When a veteran royal guard chooses to show greater deference to the mother of the Princess of Wales than to the Queen Consort herself, it raises profound questions about where genuine respect and authority truly lie within Britain's most important family. The article went on to quote anonymous palace sources who confirmed growing tensions between different factions within the royal household, though Morrison was careful to present these insights as observations rather than criticisms. He noted the stark differences in how staff members responded to various members of the royal family, the subtle but unmistakable preferences that had become apparent to close observers, and the challenges facing Camilla as she attempted to establish her authority in a role that had been defined by her predecessor's very different approach. Morrison's story was picked up immediately by other media outlets, each adding their own analysis and commentary. By mid-morning, the incident at Windsor Castle was being discussed on television news programs, debated on social media, and analyzed by royal experts who saw in Harrison's actions confirmation of theories they had been developing about the current state of the monarchy. The public reaction was swift and polarized. Supporters of the Queen Consort expressed outrage at what they saw as disrespectful treatment of a woman who had dedicated years of her life to public service and supporting the king through challenging times. They viewed Harrison's actions as inappropriate and unprofessional, regardless of whatever personal feelings might have motivated them. However, a significant portion of public commentary supported Harrison's choice, interpreting his gesture as recognition of authentic character and earned respect. Social media posts praised Carole Middleton's grace, dignity, and genuine warmth, contrasting these qualities with what some perceived as Camilla's more calculated approach to public relations and royal duties. Within Windsor Castle itself, the morning brought crisis meetings, urgent consultations, and the kind of intense behind-the-scenes activity that always accompanied major royal controversies. Margaret Thornton found herself at the center of a complex web of communications as palace officials worked to develop coherent responses to the growing media storm. The first priority was addressing the immediate personnel issue. Harrison had reported for duty that morning as scheduled, but his continued presence at his post was becoming increasingly problematic. Photographers had gathered outside the castle gates, hoping to capture images of the guard whose actions had sparked international headlines. His routine duties had become impossible to perform without generating additional media attention. Sir Christopher Hartwell, the deputy master of the household, convened a meeting at 8:30 that morning to determine how to handle Harrison's situation. Present were Margaret Thornton, Security Chief Inspector David Clark, and Assistant Private Secretary Gerald Whitmore. The discussion that followed revealed the complex challenges facing the palace in responding to an incident that was both a clear violation of protocol and a reflection of deeper institutional problems. We have to consider both the immediate practical issues and the longer-term implications, Sir Christopher began, his usual calm demeanor strained by the morning's developments. Harrison's actions were unquestionably inappropriate and cannot be seen as acceptable within our protocols. However, any disciplinary action we take will inevitably be interpreted as commentary on the broader issues the media is discussing. Inspector Clark, a no-nonsense professional who had spent 15 years managing royal security, was unequivocal in his assessment. From a security and protocol standpoint, Harrison's behavior was completely unacceptable. Guards are trained to maintain consistency in their treatment of all royal family members and authorized visitors. Personal feelings, regardless of how well-intentioned, cannot be allowed to influence professional conduct. Margaret, however, found herself in the uncomfortable position of acknowledging the complexity of the situation. While I agree that Harrison's actions violated established protocol, we also have to consider what this incident reveals about staff morale and loyalty within a household. If we respond too harshly, we risk creating additional tensions with other staff members who may sympathize with his sentiments. The meeting continued for over an hour, with participants wrestling with questions that had no easy answers. How do you discipline someone for expressing genuine respect and admiration? How do you maintain institutional authority while acknowledging legitimate concerns about leadership and character? How do you protect the dignity of the Queen Consort while addressing the underlying issues that had led to the morning's events? While palace officials debated Harrison's fate, the man himself was experiencing the surreal sensation of having become an international news story overnight. Colleagues approached him throughout the morning with expressions of support, concern, and curiosity. Some praised his courage in standing up for his convictions, while others warned him about the potential consequences of his actions. Harrison faced the attention with the same quiet dignity that had characterized his 3 decades of royal service. When pressed by colleagues for explanations or justifications, he simply stated that he had acted according to his conscience and would accept whatever consequences followed. He seemed genuinely surprised by the media attention his actions had generated, having intended them as a private gesture rather than a public statement. The most difficult conversation of Harrison's day came when he was summoned to meet with Inspector Clark for a formal interview about the protocol breach. The two men had worked together for over a decade and had developed a relationship based on mutual respect and professional cooperation. Both understood that their personal friendship could not influence the official response to Harrison's actions. "Bill," Clark began, using Harrison's first name in acknowledgement of their long relationship, "you know why we're here. What happened this morning was a serious violation of established protocols, and I need you to help me understand your thinking." Harrison sat quietly for several moments before responding. His weathered face showed the strain of the day's events, but his voice remained steady and clear. "David, in 32 years of service, I've never once allowed personal feelings to interfere with my professional duties. Every member of the royal family has received my complete loyalty and respect, regardless of my private opinions about their character or actions." "So what was different about this morning?" Clark asked. Harrison's answer revealed the depth of thought and conviction that had led to his controversial decision. "I've watched how different people treat the staff in this household, David. I've seen kindness and genuine care, and I've seen people who view us as nothing more than uniform furniture. When someone consistently demonstrates respect and consideration for others, when they treat every person they encounter with dignity and warmth, that person earns something that can't be commanded or expected. But protocol doesn't allow for those distinctions," Clark pointed out. "Our duty is to the institution and the hierarchy it represents, not to individuals based on their personal qualities." "I understand that," Harrison replied, "and I followed that principle faithfully for over 3 decades. But there comes a moment when you have to choose between protocol and conscience, between expected behavior and earned respect. This morning was that moment for me." While Harrison defended his actions to his superior, Camilla herself was dealing with the personal impact of becoming the central figure in an international story about respect, authority, and legitimacy within the royal family. The Queen Consort had faced negative publicity many times over the years, but this situation felt different and potentially more damaging. Previous controversies had generally focused on her past relationship with Charles, her role in the breakdown of his marriage to Diana, or public opinion about her suitability for royal duties. Those attacks, while painful, have been based on historical events or subjective judgments about her character and qualifications. The current situation, however, suggested that even within the royal household itself, her authority and legitimacy were being questioned. The idea that professional staff members might be making distinctions between her official position and her personal worthiness for respect was deeply troubling and potentially undermining to her ability to function effectively in her role. Camilla spent much of the day in private consultations with her closest advisors, discussing both immediate damage control strategies and longer-term approaches to addressing the underlying issues that had contributed to the crisis. These conversations were necessarily delicate, as they required honest assessments of her public image, her relationships within the royal household, and the challenges she faced in establishing genuine authority and respect. "The difficulty we face," explained her communications director, Sarah Phillips, "is that any defensive response risks appearing to validate the underlying criticisms. If we emphasize your official authority and the respect owed to your position, it might seem like we're conceding that genuine, earned respect is lacking." Camilla listened to these assessments with the kind of weary resignation that comes from years of dealing with public relations challenges. "So what do you recommend?" she asked. "I think our best approach is to focus on the broader issues rather than the specific incident," Phillips replied. "We can discuss the importance of maintaining professional standards within the royal household, while also acknowledging your commitment to building positive relationships with staff and the public." As the day progressed, additional complications emerged from unexpected quarters. Princess Catherine herself became aware of the situation through her own staff, who felt obligated to inform her that her mother had become involved in a royal controversy. Catherine's initial reaction was concern for her mother, who had never sought public attention and was undoubtedly distressed by suddenly finding herself at the center of international headlines. Catherine immediately contacted her mother to offer support and discuss how to handle the media attention. Carole Middleton, true to her character, was more concerned about the potential impact on Camilla and the royal family than about her own involvement in the story. "I feel terrible that my visit somehow contributed to this situation," Carole told her daughter during their phone conversation. "The last thing I ever intended was to create problems for anyone or to be involved in questions about protocol and respect." Catherine found herself in the delicate position of needing to support both her mother and her stepmother-in-law while navigating the complex royal politics that the incident had exposed. She understood better than most the pressures and challenges that came with royal life, and she felt genuine sympathy for Camilla, who was dealing with yet another public relations crisis through no fault of her own. At the same time, Catherine could not ignore the fact that the incident reflected broader truths about relationships and dynamics within the royal family. She had observed the same patterns that Harrison and other staff members had noticed, the differences in how people responded to various family members, the subtle distinctions between dutiful respect and genuine admiration. As afternoon turned to evening, the palace communications team worked frantically to prepare statements and responses that would address the crisis without inflaming it further. The challenge was enormous. How do you defend institutional authority while acknowledging legitimate concerns? How do you support the Queen Consort without dismissing the genuine feelings that had motivated Harrison's actions? The statement they ultimately crafted was a masterpiece of diplomatic language that managed to address multiple audiences while committing to nothing specific. The royal household maintains the highest standards of professionalism and protocol in all interactions with members of the royal family and their guests. While we do not comment on specific personnel matters, we can confirm that all staff members are expected to demonstrate appropriate respect and courtesy to everyone they encounter in the course of their duties. The Queen Consort continues to enjoy the full support and loyalty of royal household staff as she carries out her important work on behalf of the crown. But Even as palace officials worked to manage the immediate crisis, everyone involved understood that the morning's incident at Windsor Castle had exposed fundamental questions about the nature of respect, authority, and legitimacy that would not be easily resolved by careful public relations messaging. The storm that had broken over the royal household that morning was far from over, and its ultimate resolution would require confronting uncomfortable truths about leadership, character, and what it truly means to earn the loyalty and admiration of those who serve Britain's most important institution. 3 weeks after the incident that had shaken Windsor Castle to its foundations, the full consequences of Sergeant Major Harrison's momentary breach of protocol were still reverberating through the highest levels of the British monarchy. What had begun as a simple gesture of respect had evolved into a complex examination of authority, legitimacy, and the very nature of what it means to serve the crown in the modern era. King Charles himself had been briefed on the situation within hours of Morrison's story appearing in the Times. The monarch, who had spent decades navigating the intricate relationships and political dynamics of the royal household, understood immediately that the incident represented far more than a simple disciplinary matter. It was instead a window into the complex web of loyalties, resentments, and unspoken truths that existed within his own family and the institution he now led. Charles had always been acutely aware of the challenges his wife faced in establishing her authority and legitimacy within the royal family. He had witnessed firsthand the decades of criticism, scrutiny, and resistance that had accompanied her journey from controversial mistress to queen consort. Despite his unwavering support and the official recognition of her position, he knew that Camilla continued to face skepticism from various quarters, including some within the royal household itself. The Harrison incident forced Charles to confront the reality that these challenges were not merely matters of public opinion or media perception. They extended into the very heart of the royal establishment, affecting the people who worked most closely with the royal family and who were responsible for maintaining the dignity and authority of the institution. In a private meeting with his most trusted advisors, Charles expressed his frustration and concern about the broader implications of the incident. "We cannot have a situation where members of our household staff are making personal judgments about who deserves their respect and deference," he stated firmly. "The monarchy depends on consistent protocol and unwavering loyalty to the institution, regardless of individual preferences or opinions." However, even as Charles articulated these principles, he found himself grappling with more complex questions. How do you command genuine respect and loyalty? How do you address legitimate concerns about character and leadership while maintaining institutional authority? And what does it mean for the future of the monarchy when even dedicated servants are making distinctions between official positions and personal worthiness? Sir Clive Alderton, Charles's principal private secretary and one of his most trusted advisors, offered a perspective that reflected years of experience in managing royal affairs. "Your Majesty, while we must certainly address the protocol breach and maintain disciplinary standards, we also have to consider what this incident reveals about staff morale and the dynamics within our household. Dismissing these concerns entirely might create additional problems rather than solving existing ones." The conversation that followed revealed the complexity of the challenges facing the modern monarchy. Charles and his advisors discussed the delicate balance between maintaining institutional authority and acknowledging legitimate grievances, between supporting Camilla's position as queen consort and addressing the underlying issues that had contributed to the crisis. Meanwhile, Harrison himself was experiencing the surreal reality of having become a reluctant symbol in a debate about respect, authority, and moral courage. His disciplinary hearing had been scheduled for the following week, and palace officials had made it clear that significant consequences were likely. Yet instead of regret, Harrison found himself feeling a sense of peace about his actions that surprised even him. The guard had received dozens of letters and messages of support from people across Britain and around the world who had learned about his story through media coverage. Many of these communications came from current and former service members who understood the weight of the choice he had made between institutional loyalty and personal conscience. One letter from a retired Royal Navy officer particularly resonated with Harrison. There comes a moment in every person's career when they must choose between what is expected and what is right. You chose to honor character and earned respect over hollow protocol. While there may be consequences for your decision, you can face them knowing that you acted with integrity and courage. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. Carole Middleton herself had requested permission to write to Harrison, expressing her gratitude for his courtesy while also conveying her regret that his kindness had resulted in such complicated consequences. "Dear Sergeant Major Harrison," her letter began, "I was deeply moved to learn of the respectful greeting you offered during my recent visit to Windsor Castle, and I am profoundly sorry that your act of courtesy has created difficulties for you. Please know that your gesture was noted and appreciated not only for its personal kindness, but for what it represents about the values of dignity and respect that should characterize all our interactions with one another." The letter went on to express Carole's hope that the incident might ultimately lead to positive changes in how people within and outside the royal household thought about respect, authority, and the difference between positions that are held and respect that is earned. As the date of Harrison's disciplinary hearing approached, pressure began mounting from various quarters for a resolution that would address the protocol breach while acknowledging the complex issues that had contributed to the incident. Several members of Parliament had privately expressed concerns about the situation, suggesting that overly harsh punishment might create public relations problems for the monarchy. More significantly, Catherine herself had requested a private meeting with her father-in-law to discuss the situation. The Princess of Wales rarely intervened in palace personnel matters, but she felt compelled to speak on behalf of both her mother and the guard whose actions had inadvertently created such controversy. The meeting between Charles and Catherine took place in the king's private study at Clarence House, away from the formal settings where most royal business was conducted. Catherine approached the conversation with the diplomatic skills she had developed over more than a decade of royal marriage, but also with the directness that had always characterized her approach to family matters. "I understand the importance of maintaining protocol and institutional authority," Catherine began, "but I also think we need to consider what this incident reveals about how people within our household perceive respect, character, and leadership. Sergeant Major Harrison is a man of exemplary service and unquestioned loyalty to the crown. His actions weren't motivated by disrespect or insubordination, but by recognition of qualities that he clearly found admirable." Charles listened carefully to his daughter-in-law's perspective, understanding that she was speaking not only as a concerned family member, but as someone who had observed the dynamics within the royal household from a unique vantage point. "Catherine," he replied, "I appreciate your concern for everyone involved in this situation, but we cannot establish a precedent where staff members feel entitled to make personal judgments about who deserves their respect and deference. The monarchy depends on consistency and unwavering loyalty to the institution." "I understand that completely," Catherine responded, "but I also think we need to examine what kind of leadership and character inspire genuine loyalty rather than merely dutiful compliance. Mother has never sought special treatment or recognition, but she has consistently demonstrated the kind of character and values that naturally earn respect from people at every level of society." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, covering not only the immediate questions about Harrison's fate, but also the broader issues about leadership, respect, and the evolution of the monarchy in the modern era. Both Charles and Catherine understood that they were discussing fundamental questions about what the royal family should represent and how its members should relate to the people who serve them. 2 days later, Camilla herself requested a meeting with Charles to discuss the situation and her thoughts on how it should be resolved. The Queen Consort had spent weeks reflecting on the incident and its implications, and she had reached conclusions that surprised even those closest to her. "Charles," she began, "I've been thinking extensively about this situation, and I believe we have an opportunity to turn a crisis into something constructive. Rather than simply punishing Sergeant Major Harrison for his breach of protocol, we should examine what his actions reveal about the kind of leadership and character that inspired genuine respect and loyalty. Charles was intrigued by his wife's perspective, which differed significantly from the more traditional approaches that had been suggested by palace advisors. Camilla continued, "I've spent years trying to earn acceptance and respect within this family and this institution. I've worked hard, supported important causes, and tried to serve with dignity and grace. But I've also maintained a certain distance and formality that may have prevented me from developing the kind of personal connections that inspire genuine loyalty and admiration." "What are you suggesting?" Charles asked. "I think we should view this incident as an opportunity to examine our relationships with the people who serve this institution," Camilla replied. "Rather than simply demanding respect based on our positions, we should work to earn it through our character, our treatment of others, and our genuine care for the people around us." The Queen Consort's perspective reflected a wisdom and self-awareness that had developed through years of navigating complex royal politics and public scrutiny. She understood that true authority and respect could not be commanded or expected. They had to be earned through consistent demonstration of character, integrity, and genuine concern for others. Based on these conversations and consultations, Charles and his advisors developed an approach to resolving the Harrison situation that addressed both the immediate protocol concerns and the broader questions about leadership and respect within the royal household. Harrison's disciplinary hearing took place on a quiet Thursday morning in November. Rather than the formal tribunal that many had expected, the session was conducted as a thoughtful discussion between Harrison and senior palace officials, including Sir Christopher Hartwell and Inspector Clark. The decision reached reflected the complexity of the situation and the various perspectives that had been considered. Harrison received an official reprimand for his breach of protocol, acknowledging that personal feelings could not be allowed to override professional duties. However, the reprimand was accompanied by recognition of his exemplary service record and the positive intentions that had motivated his actions. More significantly, the palace announced that the incident had prompted a comprehensive review of relationships between royal family members and household staff, with the goal of ensuring that all interactions were characterized by mutual respect, dignity, and recognition of each person's contributions to the institution's success. The announcement also included a personal statement from the Queen Consort herself, in which she expressed her appreciation for the dedication and service of all royal household staff, and her commitment to building positive relationships based on mutual respect and recognition of each person's worth and dignity. "I have been deeply moved by the loyalty and dedication shown by the men and women who serve this institution," Camilla's statement read. "Their commitment to excellence and their care for the royal family deserve recognition and appreciation, not merely as professionals, but as individuals who contribute to the success and dignity of the monarchy through their daily efforts." The resolution of the Harrison incident was generally well received by both the media and the public, who viewed it as a thoughtful approach to a complex situation that acknowledged legitimate concerns while maintaining institutional authority. For Harrison himself, the outcome represented vindication of his belief that respect and authority should be based on character and earned through consistent demonstration of positive qualities. While he had faced consequences for his breach of protocol, those consequences had been tempered by recognition of the valid concerns that had motivated his actions. More importantly, the entire episode had sparked conversations throughout the royal household about leadership, respect, and what it means to serve an institution that represents the best values and traditions of British society. In the months that followed, observers noted subtle but significant changes in how various members of the royal family interacted with household staff. There was a greater emphasis on personal connection, recognition of individual contributions, and acknowledgement that respect and loyalty are most genuine when they are earned rather than simply expected. Carole Middleton continued her occasional visits to royal residences, maintaining the same warmth and genuine interest in the people around her that had first impressed Harrison and countless others. Her approach to relationships, based on authentic care, respect for others regardless of their position, and recognition of everyone's inherent dignity, had become an unofficial model for how members of the royal family might build genuine connections with the people who serve them. The incident at Windsor Castle that October morning had begun as a simple gesture of respect from one person to another. But its consequences had revealed profound truths about leadership, character, and what it means to earn the loyalty and admiration of others. In the end, Harrison's choice to bow more deeply to character than to position had prompted an entire institution to examine its values, its relationships, and its understanding of what respect truly means. As winter settled over the ancient stones of Windsor Castle, the guard posts continued to be manned by dedicated professionals who understood their duty to serve the crown with honor and integrity. But now they also served an institution that had been reminded of the importance of earning respect through character, building genuine relationships with the people around them, and recognizing that true authority comes not from position alone, but from the consistent demonstration of the values and qualities that inspire others to offer their loyalty willingly rather than merely as a matter of duty. The story of when a guard showed more respect to Carole Middleton than to Camilla had become more than just an account of a protocol breach. It had become a lesson about the difference between expected deference and earned respect, between institutional authority and moral authority, and between the positions people hold and the character they demonstrate through their daily actions and interactions with others.